Listening is one of the most difficult life skills to master. Even the most respected leaders face criticism, especially when the stakes are much higher than they are here. Nonetheless, listening is especially important for the children we serve because it makes them feel seen. Take a moment and let that sink in. You have the power to make someone who may not feel like they matter feel significant just by listening to them. You might be surprised to know this, but the effects of poor listening are not just experienced by the listener, they're also experienced by the speaker. The listener determines more than 50% of the conversation. That means more than half of the effectiveness of the speaker is in the hands of the listener. How is that possible? Well, a good listener is paying attention to what is being said. They're asking thoughtful questions, and they're conveying what is understood and what is unclear from what the speaker is saying. Before I jump into what active listening is or how to do it, I wanted to cover 6 archetypes of what we may be exhibiting when we're being bad listeners. I'll admit, I've demonstrated all 6. Sometimes on the same day. The important thing is to familiarize yourself with the archetypes and set up some figurative alarm bells for your own off-putting behavior as you continue on your journey to become a better listener. I remember being in college and having a mentor interrupt me and say, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, which means we should be speaking for half the time we're listening." It was his nice way of telling me I was talking too much. I appreciated the feedback and actually think it's a good rule of thumb to keep in mind in any conversation with individuals or a group. The first bad listener archetype is the opinionator. The opinionator listens to others primarily to determine whether or not their ideas conform to what he or she already believes to be true. Opinionators may appear to be listening closely, but they aren't listening with an open mind and instead often use their silences as opportunities to reload. While opinionators might have good intentions, the effect of this listening style is to make conversation partners uncomfortable or even to intimidate them. Opinionators routinely crush others' ideas. The second bad listener archetype is the grouch. Grouches are poor listeners who are blocked by a feeling of certainty that your idea is wrong. They don't make their contempt for other people's ideas a secret either. In fact, they approach conversations as a necessary evil and send implicit messages to others like, "You're full of it, you're a fool, why'd you think I'd be interested in this?" Through perseverance, people could get through to grouches in conversations. However, most people simply don't have the energy to break down barriers every time they need to express an idea to a grouch. The third bad listener archetype is a preambler. The preambler usually has windy lead-ins, and their questions are really stealth speeches, often intended to box conversation partners into a corner. Preamblers use questioning to steer the discussion, send warnings, or generate a desired answer. They are the epitome of one-way communication. The fourth bad listener archetype is the preservator. Preservators talk a lot without saying anything. If you pay close attention to one of these poor listeners, you'll find that their comments and questions don't advance the conversation. As often as not, preservators are editing on the fly and fine-tuning their thoughts through reiteration. Preservators use the thoughts of their conversation partners to support their own prejudices, biases, or ideas. When talking to one, you may feel like the two of you are having completely different conversations. The fifth bad listener archetype is the answer person. Everyone wants to solve problems, but answer person spouts solutions before there's even a consensus about the challenge. A clear signal that input from conversation partners isn't needed. Answer person may appear at first to be an opinionator, but the latter is motivated by strong feelings of being right, while the former is desperately eager to please and impress. You know you're speaking to the answer person if your conversation partner can't stop providing solutions, has ready answers for any flaws you point out, as well as quick answers to all the points you raise. The sixth bad listener archetype is the pretender. Pretenders fake engagement and even agreement, but either aren't interested in what you're saying or have already made up their minds. They have all the right moves, seeming to hang on to every word uttered and frequently win people over with a knowing, empathetic smile. They give their conversation partners every indication that they're processing their words and agreeing with them. Yet eventually, people realize the pretender doesn't act on anything they said, or worse, doesn't have access to the information from the conversation when it comes time to make decisions or take actions. One of my leadership coaches used to remind me, awareness precedes choice. That is, once we're aware of our default tendencies or undesirable behaviors, i.e. bringing consciousness to something that is normally happening subconsciously, we can choose to act and behave in a more favorable way. I know this was a really long lead up to active listening, but we need to know what stands in our way before we can move past it. Active listening is a crucial communication skill that can improve your relationships and help you in all sorts of situations and in your leadership, but especially when you're educating. Active listening can be especially difficult if you're anything like me and your mind is constantly racing with new ideas. I struggled with this skill for years without even being conscious of it because I had a tendency to problem solve and finish other people's sentences. It took me a while to realize that most people don't want you to solve their problems. They want you to understand what they're going through. They want you to see them. It wasn't until a friend called me out for finishing their sentences that I knew I had a problem. Up until that point, I thought I was helping them find the right word or phrase to express themselves. That's when it dawned on me that I can't be actively listening to them if I'm anticipating what they're going to say. Mind blown. Here are 5 key aspects of active listening. Number 1, pay full attention. This means putting away distractions, making eye contact, and focusing on the speaker. In this case, the scholars you're working with. Number 2, use nonverbal cues. Nodding, smiling, and leaning in to show that you're engaged and interested in what the other person is saying. Number 3, ask open-ended questions. This encourages the person speaking to elaborate on their thoughts and feelings. It also gives them a signal of where they've been unclear. Number 4, avoid interruptions. When we're actively listening, we always let the speaker finish their thought before responding. And finally, number 5, and probably the hardest and most important of these, paraphrase and reflect. Once the speaker shares a portion of what they said, briefly summarize what you heard using as much of their words as possible. For example, a scholar says to you, "I've tried this 3 different ways already, and I just don't know what to do anymore." Our natural instinct is to respond and problem solve. Our immediate response might be to say, "Show me what you've done," or "Do you want to try it together?" While they're not necessarily bad responses, they aren't demonstrating active listening. Instead, if we were practicing active listening, we would say, "So what I'm hearing you say is that you're feeling frustrated with the current assignment. Is that right?" This not only clarifies the message, but it invites the scholar to affirm that it's either correct or clarified, which could take the conversation in a completely different direction. More importantly, it makes them feel heard, and everyone loves being heard. Let's cover 2 more examples. During a class discussion, a scholar shares that they're struggling with a math concept. You maintain eye contact, nod to show understanding, and let them finish speaking without interrupting. Then you say, "I hear that you're finding fractions challenging. Can you tell me more about which part is confusing for you?" This opens up a dialogue where the scholar feels heard and you can provide targeted help. In another example, a scholar seems unusually quiet and withdrawn. You approach them after class and ask, "I've noticed you've been quieter than usual. Is there something on your mind?" They open up about feeling overwhelmed with homework. You listen attentively, paraphrase their concerns, and respond with, "It sounds like you're feeling a lot of pressure with your workload. Is that right?" This demonstrates empathy and begins to provide a pathway to support the scholar. Developing our active listening skills is vital for improving communication and understanding in the classroom. By fully engaging with your scholars, you demonstrate that their thoughts and feelings matter, building trust and encouraging open communication.